What if I told you they're SUVs so reliable, people buy them once and never think about repairs again? Not because they're nightmares to fix, but because there's almost nothing to fix. While most owners are bracing for the next expensive repair, these machines just keep going, and going, and going. We're talking 300,000 miles like it's a casual suggestion, bulletproof engines that laugh at age, resale values that refuse to drop. Forget planned obsolescence. These SUVs were built by engineers who clearly had a personal vendetta against tow trucks. And here's the part nobody tells you. Owning one of these doesn't just save you repair bills. It changes your insurance costs, your depreciation curve, even how long you're stuck making car payments. Some of them make extended warranties completely pointless. Others quietly print money every time you pass a gas station. Today, I'm counting down 5 legendary SUVs you'll buy once and still be driving when your grandkids are grown. And make sure to watch until the end, because the number 1 SUV is the one that almost never breaks down. We're starting this countdown at number 5, and it's the SUV almost nobody expects to see here. The Hyundai Santa Fe. If I had told you 20 years ago that a Hyundai would end up on a list of SUVs that almost never break down, you would have laughed, and you would have been right to do so. The modern Santa Fe exists because Hyundai made a very deliberate decision to build vehicles that people could buy once and keep indefinitely, instead of cycling through repairs, trade-ins, and replacements every few years. That shift is obvious in the way this SUV is engineered from the inside out. Hyundai didn't chase fragile performance numbers or complicated systems designed to impress during a test drive. They focused on making every major component survive long after most vehicles start falling apart. Under the hood, the Santa Fe's 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder V6 engines are built with conservative tolerances and heavy-duty materials that prioritize longevity over excitement. Multi-layer steel head gaskets replace failure-prone composite designs. Industrial-grade timing chains eliminate routine replacement intervals, and the oiling system is deliberately overbuilt, so internal wear stays minimal even as mileage climbs well past what most owners expect. These engines aren't stressed or pushed to their limits in daily driving, which is exactly why they keep running year after year, with nothing more than basic maintenance. Hyundai backs this confidence with one of the longest powertrain warranties in the industry, 10 years or 100,000 miles, not as a sales trick, but because these powertrains are designed to survive far beyond that point. In real-world ownership, it's becoming increasingly common to see Santa Fe's pass 200,000 miles without major engine or internal transmission repairs, which is exactly what buy once and drive forever looks like in practice. The Santa Fe earns its 5th place on this list because it represents a modern SUV built with an old-school mindset. Keep it simple, overbuild what matters, and eliminate the reasons vehicles usually die. For owners who want to buy once, avoid breakdowns, and drive the same SUV year after year without surprises, the Santa Fe quietly does exactly that. At number 4, we're moving to an SUV that never needed a comeback story because it's been quietly refusing to break down for decades. The Subaru Forester. The Subaru Forester is the kind of SUV that shows up at 3 in the morning in the middle of a blizzard without being asked, and then drives you home like it's nothing. It earns its 4th place here for one simple reason. It keeps working in conditions that slowly destroy most other SUVs, and it keeps doing it year after year without complaint. Let's address the elephant in the room right away, because everyone brings it up. Yes, early Subaru engines had head gasket issues, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. What matters, though, is that Subaru fixed that problem more than a decade ago, redesigned the engines from the inside out, and quietly moved on while the reputation stuck around. The modern Forester benefits from those lessons, and what's left today is one of the most durable, low-stress engine designs still on the road. Subaru doubled down on that philosophy with its full-time symmetrical all-wheel drive system, which is a major reason Foresters rack up insane mileage without major failures. Unlike reactive systems that wait for traction loss before scrambling to respond, Subaru's system is always engaged, distributing power evenly and consistently. That constant balance reduces shock loads on components, prevents sudden drivetrain stress, and dramatically extends the life of differentials, axles, and drive shafts. Subaru doesn't build this system to impress in a brochure. They build it so it keeps working year after year in rain, snow, mud, gravel, and whatever else you throw at it. All of that durability translates directly into resale value. Even 5-year-old Foresters command prices that make other brands look disposable, because buyers know they're not inheriting someone else's problems. They're buying an SUV that's barely broken in. The Forester doesn't really have a high-mileage reputation, it just has mileage. At number 3, reliability stops being situational and starts being effortless. The Honda CR-V. The Honda CR-V doesn't feel special when you first drive it, and that's exactly why it ends up being one of the longest-lasting SUVs ever built. This is a vehicle designed from the ground up to avoid drama, avoid complexity, and avoid the kinds of failures that send most SUVs to the scrapyard long before their engines are actually worn out. For a CR-V, 100,000 miles is not a checkpoint. It's barely the break-in period. In real-world ownership, these SUVs regularly pass 250,000 and even 300,000 miles with their original internal engine components still intact, original catalytic converters still functioning, and transmissions that have never been rebuilt or replaced. That kind of longevity isn't luck. It's the result of Honda engineering this vehicle to survive decades of daily use without asking much in return. The heart of that durability is Honda's K-Series 4-cylinder engine, whether it's the older 2.4-liter naturally aspirated version or the newer turbocharged variants. These engines are not pushed to their limits, which is exactly why they last so long. Compression ratios are kept conservative to reduce internal stress. Cooling systems are deliberately oversized so heat never becomes a long-term problem, and the oil passages are designed to keep critical components lubricated even as mileage climbs into territory where most engines start showing serious wear. It's not unusual to open up a high-mileage CR-V engine and still see factory crosshatch marks on the cylinder walls at 200,000 miles, a clear sign that internal wear happens slowly, if at all. The transmission follows the same philosophy. Whether it's the older 5-speed automatic or the newer CVT, the CR-V's gearboxes are built to last, not to impress. Fluid passages are large, cooling is redundant, and internal components are spec'd well beyond what the engine actually demands. Honda tunes these transmissions conservatively, which means less heat, less shock, and far fewer failures over time. With basic fluid changes, these transmissions routinely outlast the rest of the vehicle, which is exactly what you want if your goal is to drive the same SUV for as long as possible. The result is an SUV that behaves more like a household appliance than a machine. It doesn't demand attention, it doesn't surprise you with sudden failures, and it doesn't slowly bleed you with constant repairs. You buy it, you maintain it reasonably, and it just keeps going long after most vehicles would have been written off. At number 2, we leave everyday reliability behind and step into something built to survive almost anything. The Toyota Land Cruiser. If the phrase "built to last" actually means anything, the Toyota Land Cruiser is what it's supposed to describe. This isn't an SUV that happens to be reliable. It's an SUV engineered under the assumption that breaking down is not an option, because in many parts of the world, it literally isn't. The Land Cruiser has spent decades being used in environments where failure means being stranded hundreds of miles from help, and that reality shaped every engineering decision. The engines are naturally aspirated, heavily detuned, and massively understressed, whether you're talking about the legendary inline-6 or Toyota's V8s. These motors are not chasing efficiency or performance numbers. They're built to run day after day under load, heat, dust, and abuse without internal damage. That's why it's completely normal to see Land Cruisers pass 300,000 miles, and in many cases 400,000 or more, without ever being opened up. The transmission follows the same philosophy. No CVTs, no dual-clutch experiments, no fragile multi-gear setups designed to impress on paper. Just traditional torque converter automatics built with oversized components and conservative tuning. With basic fluid changes, these transmissions don't wear out. They simply keep going, often outlasting the rest of the vehicle around them. What really separates the Land Cruiser from almost everything else, though, is how it behaves over decades of ownership. These vehicles are rarely sold because they fail. They're sold because fuel costs get annoying or because someone wants something newer. Even then, buyers actively seek out high-mileage examples because a Land Cruiser with 250,000 miles is widely considered to be nowhere near the end of its life. The Toyota Land Cruiser exists for one reason: to keep going when everything else would have already quit. And if your goal is to buy one SUV and drive it for as long as humanly possible, there are very few vehicles ever built that make that promise as convincingly as this one. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around, because this is where it all comes together. The Land Cruiser proves what extreme durability looks like, but number one earns the top spot by never breaking down in everyday ownership. That SUV is the Toyota RAV4. The Toyota RAV4 isn't just reliable, it's aggressively reliable in a way that almost feels intentional. This is the SUV that keeps running not only when it's cared for, but even when it's actively neglected, which is exactly why it belongs at the top of any conversation about vehicles that simply don't break down. There are countless real-world examples of RAV4s continuing to start every single morning, despite oil that looks more like chocolate pudding than lubricant, air filters packed with years of debris, and maintenance schedules that were forgotten sometime during a previous administration. These vehicles don't just tolerate neglect, they seem to ignore it, which is a rare and valuable trait if your goal is to own one SUV for as long as possible. A big part of that longevity comes from what sits under the hood. The RAV4's 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine is deliberately simple, with fewer moving parts, conservative tuning, and no unnecessary complexity. Fewer moving parts mean fewer opportunities for failure, and Toyota engineered this engine to operate well below its stress limits during normal driving. The result is an engine that wears slowly, stays internally clean, and continues running smoothly long after most engines would have developed serious problems. Toyota's real advantage, though, is what it does with the parts nobody talks about. Instead of cutting costs on suspension bushings, wheel bearings, alternators, or brake components, Toyota over-engineers what are usually considered boring parts. Those components are rated well beyond the demands of everyday driving, which means they don't slowly fall apart as mileage climbs. That attention to detail is why high-mileage RAV4s tend to feel intact rather than worn out. That reputation shows up clearly in resale value. 5-year-old RAV4s routinely retain 60 to 70% of their original value, and certain trims barely depreciate at all. Buyers line up for used RAV4s because they aren't gambling on reliability. They already know the outcome. The Toyota RAV4 earns its first place in this video because it does exactly what the title promises. You buy it, you maintain it reasonably, and it just keeps going for hundreds of thousands of miles without demanding attention. It doesn't age dramatically, it doesn't fall apart quietly, and it doesn't surprise you with major failures once the warranty expires. At the end of the day, this video wasn't about which SUV feels the nicest or looks the most impressive in a parking lot. It was about one thing only: which SUVs can keep going when everything else starts breaking down. Every vehicle on this list earned its place the same way, not through marketing, not through hype, and not through short-term reviews, but by stacking up miles without stacking up repair bills. These are SUVs built with conservative engines, proven transmissions, and components designed to wear slowly instead of fail suddenly. They don't surprise you with warning lights, and they don't force you into expensive decisions once the warranty runs out. That's why the phrase "buy once and drive forever" actually applies here. Owners of these SUVs don't plan around breakdowns. They don't trade in out of fear. They drive them past 100,000 miles, then 200,000, and often far beyond that, because the vehicles simply keep working. And that's the real lesson. SUVs that never break down aren't accidents. They're the result of engineering choices. Fewer fragile systems, less unnecessary complexity, more focus on durability than novelty. When manufacturers get that right, you don't just save money. You gain time, confidence, and freedom from constant repairs. If this list helped you understand which SUVs are built to go the distance, hit the like button so this reaches people who are tired of vehicles that don't last. Subscribe if you want more straight talk breakdowns focused on long-term ownership, not hype. And let me know in the comments which SUV you'd trust to run until the wheels fall off, or which one you think truly deserves the title of Never Breaks Down. Because in the end, the best SUV isn't the newest one. It's the one that's still running when most others are already gone.